Manchester City versus Tottenham was fun, wasn't it? Goals galore! And to analyse what we actually learned from this game, it's me, JJ Bull, and also it's him,
Jon Mackenzie.
Yes. Now, John, what do we learn from this game? The first thing probably what we learned is that Ange Postecoglou doesn't change for nobody.
No, he doesn't. And what that means is that he's going to get his team building up from the back, even when they're under intense pressure.
Yes. So no matter what's happening, Spurs will commit to playing the ball out from the back under pressure from the best pressing team or one of the best pressing teams in the world. Is this a silly idea? Do you like it or not? Do you think he needs to be pragmatic, like people have said?
You know, it's funny, like, as an analyst, I try and be neutral on these things because I feel as though you can't just go down the route of saying this way is the right way of playing and this way isn't. Yeah. Everyone can play the way that they want to play as a coach. And obviously each coach has players, and each of those players will have different skill sets. And so the job of the coach is to assess those players and determine what is the best way to play them. Right?
If you're brought in as the manager of a team like Tottenham, who have not been fantastic over the last while, I mean, you're hired for what you're good at, and the reason you get good at something normally is because you stick to what you know and do something that you want to do. So there's a little bit of variation. Did the same as everyone else and went all defensive and just tried to sit back. Like, this is the thing with this game. Had Tottenham sat back in just a block and just tried to steal it at the end with like they open up in the last 15, 10 minutes or something, like a lot of managers do, sit deep, try and block it, would they have had a better result? Surely it's just the same thing, right? But you just do it in a more entertaining way.
Yeah, I mean, I'm old enough to remember the last few times that Spurs have beaten Man City, and those games have generally involved a low block and counter, right? And ironically enough, the first goal in this game was it's obviously not from a low block and counter situation, but it's from a situation where the ball is
it's a corner, right?
Yes, it's a City corner, comes in, and then Spurs are able to move through the gears really quickly and generate a chance, which is how they've done it in the past.
But then that isn't surely part of the process of learning how to be good at playing through a press. Because like even when Brian Hill gets the ball, it's round about here. He's surrounded by, I mean, I'm just making up the players, right?
He's surrounded by Phil Foden, which I don't know if that necessarily counts as being surrounded.
Oh, do you think you should tackle him?
Well, yeah. So the first situation that you have for that goal is Brian Hill has the ball on the edge of the box and Phil Foden is here, and he sort of hesitates a little bit. And I think, you know, you've got Phil Foden, you've got Jeremy Doku in this sort of area because these two guys are not going to score from a corner. So you have them as speedy recovery players.
Yeah.
In that situation, I'd always want Foden either to just get the foul or just do anything to stop this play. In the end, the ball comes out to, I think it's Lo Celso, right, who then plays this direct pass across the field. And you're in this situation, it's obviously Son here, but you're in this situation where you've got Jeremy Doku here, and you can tell he's sort of a little bit unsure as to what he's supposed to be doing. There's a couple of players, there's another player, I think, who is it that's running down I can't remember who's running down the outside, maybe it's Kulusevski. But he's in this situation where he's like, I'm not sure who I should go to. He ends up losing the flight of the ball a little bit.
I think he loses the flight of the ball. He tries to slow down so he can read it. Yeah.
And then Son is able to just get the header, carry it past him, into this kind of area and just has a direct chance on goal. So, Route 1 direct attacking football, it is the kryptonite for Man City, especially when you're in this sort of scenario where you've got your quick recovery players who aren't really beefy.
But Route 1 football, but then I would argue that the way that Hill, because he sort of turns, he does almost a 270, 360 here, keeping the ball. I think it'd be very easy when he receives the ball here just to knock it into the channel and then just try and push up and go from there. I mean, obviously, lots of teams, regardless of how they play, whether they play from the back or not, are good and they will practice doing these counter-attack moves so you can move up the pitch. But committing to this exact sort of thing, so I think had he just cleared the ball and got rid of it, that's what Postecoglou would have then said, we don't do that. And it's early days still at Tottenham and he's trying to put this into his team. One of the things he said after the game, actually, I think it was after the game, said that, I can't actually remember the quote, but what he said along the lines of was that you want to commit to what you're doing because when you're under pressure, that's when you want to make sure that you stick to what you're doing. It's very easy just to revert to getting rid of it because that's kind of what you're not taught as when you're young, but what you think is safe. But actually, the quicker the ball goes away, the faster it comes back. And then you see in different situations where Spurs were able to play through the press. Like sometimes you had Basuma who took too long, made the wrong decision. There's never a time where Royale had the ball and took too long, didn't make the right decision. But the more you do this under pressure, surely the better those players will get. And as you improve the team and add players who are much better at that, you just make yourself better. So to me, it makes perfect sense what they're doing. And they created chances to score by sticking to that plan.
Yeah, I think this is a sort of game that you have to analyse it as a coach and say, you know, it's away at Manchester City. We're not going to necessarily win playing in another way. Do I change up the system completely and risk. What's the point?
You're likely to lose, right? So you might as well just have.
And what benefit do you get from that if you play a different way that you don't use for the rest of the season? I can understand why a coach would be like, "What's the point of changing things up? Because this is the way that we're always going to play. So let's just use this as another chance to benefit from an opposition who are going to cause us problems doing this."
There must be a sort of psychological benefit to it throughout the squad as well, especially because it's actually, it's worked, right? It has worked because they've got a draw out of it. Although I know you'd argue that the XG is very, very low, so it's perhaps not proof of that. But the result shows that they got it. And I would say that the way they draw players out by playing the short passes is something that I really like. It's fun to watch, but it also does work and means that the high risk versus high reward thing, you'll get that. Occasionally you could easily be pummeled by the pass across by Royale or Basuma losing the ball. But it's not that Postecoglou as well, I think they come out of this, so Postecoglou was maybe told, or people have said that he wasn't pragmatic enough, didn't make any changes, stuck to his ways, and that's naive, people have said. I don't think you can say that's naive if you've got all the way up from where he started to being the Tottenham manager. But they did make a change in the second half, which shows he's doing something.
In the first half, you've talked already about how there were certain situations where they ended up losing the ball a bit, and that was partly down to the Man City press, I think, being really, really dangerous. So the way that they set up was they basically pushed Haaland and Alvarez onto the centre backs here, and they just went player for player pretty much across the field. So you've got
this is first half.
This is first half. Yeah. So Doku following Porro, Foden following Udogie, and then you've got out of possession. Obviously, City are playing with the back four like this. So you've got Rodri covering two players here. So there is obviously a weakness in this sort of situation, and often what was happening was Diaz would be tracking the player that Rodri wasn't. But they're basically going player for player and able to cause a huge amount of problems. So, for example, in the situations where Royale was under pressure, often what had happened is that they'd allowed that pass from Vicario out to Royale, and then because everyone else is matched up player for player, there's no easy out ball, and so this is where you were seeing those problems caused. And so, because of this system, City were able to basically just track Spurs all the time in their own half, pretty much player for player. There's lots of flexibility as well. So I've got a few screenshots just to show what that looks like. So you can see here, this is Spurs in their build-up phase, and we can see just all the players falling player for player. So here's Haaland and Alvarez on the two centre-backs. We've got Basuma being tracked by Bernardo Silva. Here's Foden on Udogie, and then Doku on Porro here. And you can just see the edge of Rodri here in the middle. And this is one of those situations
where for a band. Yeah. The edge of Rodri.
The edge of Rodri, yeah. And this sort of situation caused lots of problems, but I've just run this tape on a little bit because you can see here, actually Rodri and Foden have switched players here. So this is Lo Celso. Foden was on Udogie, they've switched them around, and then if I fast forward another couple of seconds, we can see they switch back. So plenty of flexibility there.
Was there talk of VHS earlier? You referred to this as a tape.
the tape. We'll move the tape forward. But again, here you can see Diaz on Kulusevski right the way up the field as well. So just going player for player all the way across the pitch in order to cause them problems. In the second half, we saw there was this substitution where Højbjerg came on for Bryan Gil, and we saw Kulusevski going out wide, Lo Celso going a little bit forward. And then what Spurs basically did was they just played a double pivot of Højbjerg and Basuma just to break that man-to-man matching that we saw across the field for
because it pulls City's structure out of.
Yeah, no, it gives you some benefits, right? It gives you benefits of being overloaded in the deeper in the field, but it means that you've got fewer players forward, right? So it's a trade-off that you're playing there. But in this instance, it just allowed Spurs to actually hold the ball a little bit longer. They had more possession in the second half than they did in the first half, and that just gave them a bit more of a base to generate some of these chances. And I think the result of that was, I've got a few examples here just showing you what was happening. We've got the two pivot players for Spurs here. Yeah. Bernardo is playing behind the two strikers, but you can see now that there's an overload in this area. Okay, Jack Grealish is nominally tracking Basuma here, but that means obviously his player is free as well. So you've still got that overload. And as the tape goes on, you can see the ball comes across. Bernardo then comes on to Basuma, and now Højbjerg is free as well. So it just gives you a little bit more flexibility to possess the ball in those deeper areas. And actually that resulted in the goal itself. So this is the situation running up to the goal. Here's your double pivot. We've now got Oliver Skipp in there. And what actually happens in this situation is the ball comes in, they're able to play the ball between them, move the ball out wide to Brennan Johnson, who then plays the cross in for Kulusevski. So you can make the argument that actually in this situation, the tweak that Postecoglou has made has actually benefited Spurs in that they are able to score a goal from this.
Do you think all photographs are tape?
Yes.
this is the very early parts of Postecoglou. He's been there for like 14 league games or something like that now. So when you're trying to introduce this whole new system, you've got to do it very clearly and simply. Is that word? Simply?
Yes.
All right, well, I'm going with it. So you have to do that, and then you can expand on it and make it more complicated. So when they're getting stuck in these sorts of situations, when City have them kind of penned in, this is version 1.0 of what he's doing. So surely over time, they will develop and get other players in who can do different things, but they'll be able to give them more options, and it will naturally progress where other people move into different areas when they can do those things. You want to make sure you get the very basics of it sorted. So for me, this high risk, high reward thing is only just starting, but it works very well. Do you like it too?
Yeah, I mean, this is the way that Ange Postecoglou plays. That's sort of the point I started off with. Like, he feels most comfortable coaching players to play in this way.
And it works.
And so there's an extent to which I am fine with him sticking with this, even in games where you might not think that you get the benefit from it.
Right, well, we should talk about Man City now, because Man City, if we learn from this game, so they feel a little bit off, even though their expected goals are second in the league for expected goals, they're second best for expected goals against. They are still clearly probably the best team they won the treble, right? There's been an actual drop-off from there. But something just feels a little bit off. Is there anything we can see that you think demonstrates that, rather than just saying it because it feels like it because they drew?
Yeah, it's a really tough one to analyse City at the moment, because if you take a game like this, you say they generated 3 goals from over 2.5 expected goals, and they conceded 3 goals from 0.5 expected goals. Like, on paper, you look at that as a coach and say, we've done our job pretty well there. We've generated a lot of chances, and we've reduced the amount of chances the opposition can score from. Now, in this instance, I think you can that's not by way of excusing what happened. And every coach will go back and look at those sequences that we've talked about and say, here's the problem here. This is what we've done wrong. This is what we could avoid. We talked about that first goal where, as I see it, there's 3 errors from City players. You've got Bryan Gil just being able to get around Foden doing nothing to stop him.
So Foden should foul him, take him down.
Yeah, anything to stop him in that situation.
They normally do that as well, City players.
They often do. And then we've got Jeremy Doku just getting completely bypassed by Son there, and then a mistake by Ederson as well. There's areas there that you can look at as a coach and say, we should do those things better. But I think that what we're seeing from City this season, at the moment, it feels to me anyway, like they're variancing down a little bit. And what I mean by that is that everything that can go wrong against them at the moment is going wrong against them. Like, there's a timeline not that far away where City actually hold on to this lead, the 3-2 lead in this game.
Happening at the same time.
Yeah, maybe there's a possible world out there where City are top of the table quite comfortably.
Spurs have won and lost and drawn this all at the same time.
That's right. But the Chelsea game as well, Man City were 4-3 up in that game.
Yeah.
They could have easily held on for that, and then that's already 4 points, which are not, that timeline is not completely beyond the scope of reality. And even the Arsenal game, which, Arsenal played really well, deserved to win from the game, but had a couple of things changed, we could have seen maybe City winning that game. Nathan Ake scores the goal, and then the ball doesn't bounce off his face later on, right? All of those things change, and City are top of the league by 6 points at this juncture. And I think that it's hard to judge where City are at because of those realities. I think in the past we're so used to City coming out on the right side of the variance here, and actually what's happening this season is that Liverpool and Arsenal are coming out on the right side of variance as well. So it's
when we say variance, we mean, just to be clear, we're talking about expected or underlying numbers. So they tend to overperform those. So if they have an XG of 28, they normally score 36 goals.
Yeah.
So it just might be reverting a little bit.
Yeah, and if you look at the expected points models, City are top of most of them. And again, the underlying numbers are simply the underlying numbers.
And they'll probably win the league.
They give an indication of what is the case. And so there's a situation where, I'm trying to be more general about this because I don't just want to be like, City have been unlucky, everyone else has been lucky, because I don't think that's the case. If you look at what's happening with Arsenal, they're defending really well and they're giving themselves a really nice base to then be lucky at, scoring goals in the last 10 minutes of games. Lucky in that sense. Yeah. And the same with Liverpool, they have such a dangerous attack that, they're scoring so many goals that they can afford to be a little bit lucky in the defensive moments. At the moment, City are not getting lucky on either end of the field. And I think that's a part and parcel of why they're in so much problem. The big question is going to be, are City going to go into their mode at the end of the season where they end up, changing everything around? Well, Pep finds his solution and then they ride home into the sunset. But I've got a funny feeling that that's not going to happen this season because, like you said, that they feel quite fragile this season, don't they?
A little bit. I think even you see it in Haaland, who scored 14 goals already in the league, but he looks a tiny bit less sharp. than I've seen him last season. Just not quite on it. I think all this is a natural drop anyway, and it's probably what they'll do is they'll kick into gear like old Man United teams used to do, and really come in the second half of the season. But talking about what they did last season, I mean, we saw John Stones move into midfield. He did that thing. Well, Kanji's been doing it now, right? And Stones has been missing. But that was the shift he made last season, Guardiola, is changing that. And that ended up with them being able to beat everyone before everyone figured out what they were doing exactly. I mean, I'm sure analysts had it within one game, but it didn't quite translate into the pitch, and they just managed to steamroll everyone. And now what you might see is something else changing. I don't know what it would be this time.
I mean, even the thing that's changed this season, we've got here like a front four of Haaland, Alvarez, Doku and Foden. That's like a super high risk for Pep Guardiola front line, right? And 2 of the goals I think that were scored in the Spurs City game came from City playing quite aggressive balls to Haaland. We've talked about there's a flicked pass I think from Alvarez to Haaland for the second goal where Davis gets that header, plays it through directly to Lo Celso, who then takes it down and finishes. That's the sort of high risk stuff we've not been seeing from City in the last few seasons, and everyone has complained about Pep Guardiola playing very boring football because City are so low risk. Well, what we're starting to see this season now is that City are becoming a lot more high risk, and the result of that is that they are then getting caught in some of these transitional moments a little bit more. So the big question is whether or not he's going to revert to type and go, actually we're going to try and avoid any of this like loose play that sees the ball turn over, and
you take Doku off, you put Grealish in.
On, yeah. Do we just see John Stones riding in on a white horse and sitting in the midfield again, and then suddenly all of these problems being sorted? And I think I
don't think you're allowed to ride a horse onto the pitch.
Yeah, I suppose it would probably help your transition defending to be able to ride a horse.
If you're good enough at it, I guess it would give you an advantage from corners, for headers. People would mostly get out of the way of you as well, but you couldn't call a foul.
It'd be quite clumsy though as well.
Could you call a foul against a horse?
Yeah, maybe. You've got to take all 4 legs rather than just 2 for it to be.
Would it count as handball if it's the front 2 legs? No, because that would be the ones it kicks with. Which ones would be the ones it plays football with? The front legs?
Yeah. Probably the front legs, yeah. So the handballs if it hits his back legs.
Hoofball. But then that's a different game altogether.
It is.
Do they have hoofs?
Yeah. Hoof it long. You can do that quite well with a horse, can't you?
Yeah.
But John Stones,
yeah,
bring him in and it does solve certain problems, right? Because you can then move Bernardo Silva out wide. You don't necessarily have to rely on Foden and Alvarez. You can play Stones in the middle and then rotate these 2. Kevin De Bruyne will be back at some point as well, we think.
On a horse?
Maybe. Not white though. I think he'd be more of a chestnut man.
You could ride an elephant in like they used to do. Imagine you're in one of those Colosseum things, or the Colosseum, and you've never seen an elephant before, or like a.
Do they have elephants in the Colosseum?
I don't know, but I like to. I know. I think it was the Romans had elephants, didn't they?
I don't know.
And then they like stole them from whatever country they'd stolen them from, and then they would go to battle, and then people would be turning up for a war, and they'd see this massive thing they've never heard of. Like, what on earth is that?
Yeah.
I guess that'd be a bit like when Man City turn up and Erling Haaland's up top.
Yeah, and people are like, what is that?
But in a globalised world, everyone knows everything about all these players because there's lots of tape you can watch them on.
Yeah, there are some interesting stories about, people having to draw elephants, having never seen them before. So the Pope would be like, okay, there's these things called elephants and they're like really impressive.
All right, we're going to draw an elephant now and that's how we're going to end it. Here's my elephant.
Deeply unwell elephant, I think.
A deeply unwell elephant. And here's John's elephant.
Here's my elephant. I've drawn a very scientific version of the elephant.
With only 2 legs, sideways. Exists in 2 dimensions.
I think you could use this in an anatomy textbook for a zoologist. This is what an elephant. I've made them hench as well. Hench. Look at the stonks on this one.
For more expert football analysis, please subscribe to Tifo IRL.
If you like this video, please consider subscribing to the channel. The Athletic is home to some of the world's best sports journalists, including David Ornstein, Daniel Taylor, Ollie Kay, Amy Lawrence and Rafa Honigstein. With the latest transfer news and insight on every Premier League football story that matters, theathletic.com puts you inside football. And you can try it for free now for 30 days. See the link in the description.